The story of Queen Mary I of England is one that is often overshadowed by her infamous nickname, Bloody Mary. But her life, fraught with personal and political tragedy, reveals a tale of a woman who is broken by love, by betrayal, and by her own desperate desire for a crown she thought she had lost forever. Born the daughter of King Henry VIII and his first wife Catherine of Aragon, Mary's early life seemed promising. She was the heir to the throne of England, but her world was upended when her father's relentless desire for a male heir led him to break with the Catholic Church. Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine was annulled, and in doing so, he declared Mary illegitimate and stripped her of her royal title. As a young princess, Mary was left humiliated, cast aside by her own father and the very kingdom she was born to rule. Her right to the throne was usurped by her younger brother, Edward VI, and for much of her youth, she was denied the power and respect she had been promised. But Mary's resilience would soon be tested, and her longing for justice would grow into a fierce determination to claim the throne that was rightfully hers. In 1553, when Edward VI died, Mary finally saw an opportunity. Edward's death left the crown open, and despite attempts by her enemies to place the Protestant Lady Jane Grey on the throne, Mary quickly gathered support and took power. At 37, Mary became Queen of England, but she was now a woman broken by years of hardship. Her legitimacy was still questioned by many, and her ascension was marked not by joy, but by a deep sense of vulnerability. Once on the throne, Mary's first act was to marry Philip II of Spain, a union that would forever define her reign. Though her marriage was politically motivated, it was driven by Mary's desperate need for love. Philip was the man she had dreamed of for years, handsome, powerful, and a Catholic monarch like herself. Their marriage was meant to secure Catholic rule in England and bring peace between their two countries, but it also revealed Mary's deep loneliness and emotional dependence. Despite her personal happiness, her marriage was politically controversial, and many in England resented the idea of a foreign king ruling alongside their queen. The tension created by Mary's marriage was just the beginning of the chaos that would mark her reign. Her decision to restore Catholicism to England after the Protestant reforms of her father and brother was seen as both a bold and dangerous move. To Mary, it was a necessary step to restore the faith of her ancestors and to bring the kingdom back to religious stability. However, her actions sparked widespread unrest, and in 1555, the burning of Protestants began. In what would become known as the Marian persecutions, hundreds of Protestants were executed for heresy, burned at the stake in the name of Catholicism. Mary's desire to restore the faith of her youth, a faith she saw as integral to her identity and her right to rule, led her to become the figure she is most remembered for, Bloody Mary. But it wasn't just her religious convictions that led to Mary's tragic downfall. The deep, unrelenting longing for a child haunted her throughout her marriage to Philip. In the midst of political turmoil and religious persecution, Mary was desperate to secure her legacy by bearing a child who would continue her rule and solidify the Tudor claim to the throne. Yet, despite her fervent prayers and efforts, her pregnancy ended in miscarriage and the hope for an heir slipped further away. With every failed pregnancy, Mary became more desperate, more broken, and more consumed by fear that her reign would be remembered as one of failure. In the heat of this personal torment, her marriage to Philip, strained and distant, became even more painful. Philip, uninterested in England's politics and the pressures of ruling, soon left her behind in pursuit of his own goals. He spent more time in Spain, leading Mary to face the crushing blow of abandonment by the one person she had hoped would support her. The sadness and loneliness of her reign began to take its toll on Mary's health and judgment. Her unrelenting desire for a child, her growing isolation, and the unyielding pressure of ruling a divided and war-torn kingdom began to break her. Mary's tragic decline culminated in a heartbreaking moment. When it seemed like her hopes for an heir were fading forever, she suffered what was later thought to be a phantom pregnancy, an emotional crisis that further shattered her resolve. Her final years were marked by personal suffering and an increasingly fragile mental state. Her health deteriorated, and her once strong will turned brittle. The woman who had once been destined for greatness, who had claimed the throne with a fiery determination, was now a queen broken by her own desires, her own fears, and the overwhelming weight of her responsibility. As the years passed, Mary's reign became synonymous with heartbreak, unfulfilled ambition, and growing frustration. The dream of a prosperous Catholic England, a vision that she had clung to so desperately, began to crumble around her. Despite her best efforts to secure the throne and solidify her place in history, Mary was haunted by the loss of her mother, the betrayal of her father, and the overwhelming challenges of ruling a kingdom divided by religious conflict. She had taken the crown, but the cost was higher than she had ever imagined. Her marriage to Philip II of Spain, initially thought to be the key to a powerful and enduring dynasty, was a tragic failure. Philip, though a loyal Catholic and a king in his own right, was not the partner Mary had hoped for. She had married him out of love and political necessity, but their relationship was marked by distance and discontent. Philip's indifference to England, combined with his frequent absences, led to a profound sense of isolation for Mary. She had hoped for a supportive partner who would help her rule and provide the much-needed heir to continue the Tudor line. Instead, she faced years of heartache and emotional neglect. Philip's departure from England to focus on his own Spanish empire only deepened the emotional toll on Mary. Left to govern alone, she became more vulnerable, and her fears of being rejected as a queen and a woman grew. She believed that her failure to bear a child had sealed her fate as a ruler and, more tragically, as a woman in the eyes of history. Her body had failed her, and she believed her reign was a disaster. Mary's obsession with producing an heir led to a series of false pregnancies, each one a heartbreaking reminder of her inability to fulfill her most desperate wish. These so-called phantom pregnancies caused a great deal of speculation and ridicule among her court and the people of England. The public's perception of her grew increasingly negative as rumors swirled about her health and the legitimacy of her pregnancy. The image of a queen who had once held so much promise was now one of tragedy and decline. Her rule, which had started with so much hope, quickly descended into a personal and political nightmare. In an attempt to secure her legacy, she ordered the execution of hundreds of Protestants, attempting to reverse the Protestant reforms of her father's reign. The brutal burnings of so many innocent people marked her reign with bloodshed, furthering her notorious reputation as Bloody Mary. The actions that had started as an attempt to restore Catholicism to England turned into a nightmare of terror and violence, driving a deeper wedge between her and the English people. The weight of these decisions began to affect Mary's mental and physical health. As her health deteriorated, her ability to govern became compromised. She had lost the support of the English people, who had grown weary of the religious persecution and violence that accompanied her rule. And with her final hope for an heir dashed, Mary found herself alone, surrounded by whispers of failure. Despite her deep religious convictions, her reign was defined by tragedy, and she could never escape the haunting knowledge that she had failed to fulfill the legacy of her mother, Catherine of Aragon, and her father's wishes. In 1558, at the age of 42, Mary's reign came to an abrupt end. She died of illness, possibly cancer, and was succeeded by her half-sister Elizabeth I, who would go on to rule for 45 years and restore Protestantism to England. Elizabeth's reign marked a stark contrast to Mary's, as she brought stability, success, and prosperity to the kingdom. But for Mary, her legacy was one of loss and bitterness, a woman who, despite her best efforts, had failed to leave behind the dynasty she had so desperately longed for. The tragedy of Mary I is that she was a woman driven by love, but ultimately consumed by it. Her quest for power, her need for an heir, and her longing for approval from the throne and from her people led her down a path of self-destruction. She was a queen who wanted to be remembered for restoring the Catholic faith to England, but instead, her reign became known for violence, failure, and heartbreak. Yet, despite her tragic end, Mary I's life and reign serve as a powerful reminder of the costs of ambition and love. Her desire to secure a legacy that ultimately failed her, became the very thing that defined her. Her reign was a cautionary tale of a woman who, driven by love and ambition, could not escape the tragedy of her own heart and the ruthless politics of a kingdom that cared little for the broken-hearted queen. In the end, her story is one of ultimate tragedy, but also one of the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming loss.